I've also noticed too that some of the gifted kids get into trouble because they're bored in class. So how can a teacher tell the difference between just a kid who is bored and a kid who's bored because they're not being pushed?
Hmm. So what you're talking about there is teachers not being able to make the distinction between ability,
Hmm.
right,
Yeah.
and maturity.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's the thing, that's the divide. And oftentimes kids are judged on their maturity, their behavior, and not their ability. And so that's where you get this roadblock in teachers not referring students to gifted programs, where you have a lot of Black and brown kids not being referred to gifted and talented programs at the same rate as white and Asian students, because they are making an assessment on behavior, the child's maturity, and not making the assessment on the child's ability. And so what I would say to teachers is they really need to understand why students might misbehave in the classroom, because they're bored, right? Two, and also you want to make sure that you're actually looking at the student's ability. So finding objective ways to assess a student's IQ and giftedness versus making a judgment call, which is latent and bias or implicit bias, right?
Hmm.
And when we've seen a number of factors that derail a Black and brown student from a gifted and talented program, but a lot of teachers also forget that based on a student's birthday, right, that can have an impact on their maturity when they start school, right? So if a student has a certain birth date that that consequentially allows a student to start school when they're an older version of 5-year-old versus a younger version of 5-year-old.
Mm.
Those kids that are older, that are an older version of 5-year-old, right? 6-7 months into that 5 versus your first month as 5. Those students that are on the older spectrum often look like they have the higher IQ, they have the higher ability to the teacher, right? Because the teacher is assessing maturity and not ability. And the kid that's younger, who just turned 5 and just happened to start school at the same time, who's coming off as less talented, is really just less immature, just less mature, right? So then you have that situation now that the older kid, the kid that the teacher is assessing for maturity, is feeding that student, right? Because they have this expectation, they expect that kid to do well. And the kid that's a little younger, who has the ability, but is being deemed because of the lack of maturity, is now starting to see roadblocks and being identified as a problem, or has learning disabilities, or just a student not deserving of a gifted and talented program. Then you start to see that separation. So I would say to teachers and school systems as a whole, right? It's teachers, administrators, school systems as a whole. They have to find objective ways to really assess if a student is gifted and talented, and that whatever process that they put in place, it needs to be across the board, because we know that based on our current referral system, students that are Black and brown are being referred to gifted and talented programs much less because of implicit bias, and because of some of the factors that I just spoke to you about, that maturity versus ability, and how oftentimes teachers are looking at maturity and not really assessing a child's ability.